Hello and welcome. My name is Simon and I am a counsellor who very much enjoys video gaming. This video is about the dangers of gaming, namely addiction. In the background of this video, I am playing a challenge run of Dark Souls 2 using just the ladle, which is a terrible, terrible weapon, and I die a lot. Maybe masochism is a risk of gaming. Feel free to watch the footage in the background of my struggles through the game as I keep dying, or just listen along to the audio on video game addiction. In August 2024, Liz Wheeler posted on X, aka Twitter, that men playing video game is peak unattractiveness. This trended and it got people asking, is gaming a red flag? Something to look out for? And it added to the demonization that gamers often face. Video game addiction, called internet gaming disorder, has also recently been added to the ICD-11, a big medical diagnostic text. So gaming addiction is a real medical condition. And this adds to a whole history of shame and guilt for the rather large, significant portion of the world that game. There are potential pretty negative messages going around that as gamers we are lazy, unattracted, addicted, and even maybe immoral or dangerous. So, as a counsellor and a casual gamer, you may well have seen some other videos on my channel advocating that gaming is actually pretty good at meeting our needs. And psychologically, a lot goes on for us when we game. Do watch those other videos, but to summarize, here's a list of different therapeutic needs we might be meeting in ourselves in our gaming. So gaming can provide a healthy escapism, can give us a sense of mastery, the ability to advance, to optimize. It can allow us exploration, role play, to figure out and come to terms owning our own moral compass. It can combat loneliness or help us to learn social skills. We can compete in gaming, and we can also learn a valuable lesson, like me dying in Dark Souls. We can learn how to lose. We can use gaming for fun, for easy stimulation. And I even talked about how it can help with mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, and trauma. Gaming can help with empathy, it can regulate our mood, it can help with decision making, it can help us to process complex life events and trauma. I quote a study that talked about Tetris being used to help people to not be traumatized by road traffic accidents. So with all this positivity, what I'm saying is that gaming, if it's balanced, can be good for us and to help us progress in life. And if we can recognize the needs we're meeting when we game, that can give us control, intentionality, and purpose in our gaming. Liz Wheeler, I am saying you are wrong, that gaming is not a red flag. But what I want to talk about in this video is that there can be red in that flag. My last video was one-sided, and I wanted to make another one to explore the darker side of video gaming. Video game addiction, compulsive gaming, compulsive play, internet gaming disorder, whatever you want to call it. I want to do a video on that. So to begin with, let's talk about addiction more generally. And when you think of addiction, you probably think of chemical addictions, alcohol, drugs, rather than behavioral ones like gaming. But let's begin by talking about addiction. Let's talk about the classic substance of choice. Let's talk about alcohol. The majority of men in the UK, 55% of us, will drink alcohol at least once a week. And of those 55% of men, a small minority will suffer with addiction. I like to think of addiction a little bit like an allergy. I'm allergic to I have hay fever, so if I go out in the fields, my nose will start running and my eyes will get all heavy, etc. Imagine addiction's a little bit like an allergy, only instead of an allergy to hay, um, fluff, hair, etc., it's an allergy to a substance, an allergy to gaming. And the allergy is that once a person starts using the thing that they are allergic to, be that alcohol or be that gaming, they are unable to stop. In the UK in 2023, figures showed that around 3% of us are drinking at a high risk level, and a further 3% are drinking at dependency levels, where the body will enter into dangerous withdrawal if it doesn't have alcohol. So with alcohol, most people, some 94% of us, will drink alcohol and use it to relax, to enhance our conversations, to have a bloody good time. But there are that 6% of folks who will veer into addiction or face serious consequences from their drinking. And in the same vein, most people will be able to hop on a game for a couple of hours a night and have that as part of a balanced life and just a normal hobby. But a small minority of people will find themselves with this same allergy. They will be unable to stop playing, and gaming will begin to take over their lives, or at least start to have negative consequences. Now, alcohol and gaming, they're different. Alcohol is a chemical addiction with withdrawal. Gaming is more a behavioural addiction, and as such, there's no detoxing from it. But like other behavioural addictions, gambling, porn, shopping, food's a bit chemical. Like other behavioural addictions, it does have the potential to be addictive. To get an idea of the statistics, the prevalence, in the UK, there are 10.84 million people who enjoy gaming. To put that in perspective, that's around a seventh of the population of the UK. And of those 10.84 million people, 45% are female. It's not just a male hobby. And the average gamer is 28 years old. So this also isn't just a thing for children and adolescents. This is a hobby enjoyed by people of all walks of life. So of that 10.84 million people, there are estimated to be some 700,000 to a million people who have issues with gaming. And that adds up to 1 in 11 gamers, about 9%, who start to lose control over their gaming and either veer into addiction or at least start to have negative consequences. And this 9%, if you look at figures, statistics, papers written on it, you'll find that 9% I've quoted is sort of in the middle. Figures vary quite widely, actually, depending on the study. Some go up as high as 17% of gamers, some go as low as 0.8% of gamers. I'll put a link, actually, at the end to all of the articles I've used in this. But there was a meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis means looking at lots of different studies and kind of pooling them together so that it's one data source. There was a meta-analysis in 2023 by Limon et al. And they got a prevalence figure of 5% of gamers meeting the threshold for internet gaming disorder. So all of this is to say that problematic gaming is a thing that affects a significant portion of people, with figures that are sort of comparable to the amount of people who are allergic to alcohol, who become alcoholics, who drink and then can't stop. So that's give us an idea of how big addiction to gaming is. Let's talk a little bit more about what addiction is. So addiction is losing control over our gaming habits. It's where gaming leads to harm in our life. A gaming addict will often relapse into periods of enthrallment in a game and feel a compulsion to game ever more frequently or more intensely. Addiction is gaming to the point that our actual brain chemistry begins to shift on things such as control, rewards, and impulsivity, where gaming becomes our main tool for emotional regulation and self-soothing. We keep feeling compelled to go back to it. Another characteristic of addiction is tolerance. Tolerance is needing more intensity of a substance, or to use that substance for longer to get the same rewards, then eventually needing copious amounts of the substance just to feel normal. It's why addicts have their lives taken over by their addiction, because it grows. And with gaming, this looks like going to games whenever we face problems in our life that start to overwhelm us. It looks like a preoccupation with gaming in our thoughts and subsequently increasing the hours we put into a game or the level of intensity of our gaming sessions and the games that we choose to play. So I've given an idea of what gaming is. In this next section, I'm going to go over some of the symptoms of video game addiction. Just have some tea. Being a true Brit. The first and main symptom is a compulsion to game, and then a need to spend ever increasing amounts of time gaming. So if we're spending a lot of time gaming, if that's become the focus of our life, this can lead us to neglect a whole host of things. So these are indirect consequences of spending all our time on a game. Firstly, we can neglect our interoceptive needs. So that's things like remembering to drink, like me having the tea just there, remembering to have enough food, to have water, to sleep, or even just sort of waking up in the middle of the night to game. We may neglect our self-care. We might not be bathing and changing our clothes. We might have medical issues and decide not to book GP appointments because it gets in the way of our gaming. There can be physical health issues from staring at a screen all day, or from the static posture of sitting in a chair and not sort of moving around. And with that, exercise might go out the window as well, which can have various consequences. We might not go outside. We might not get enough daylight. We may neglect our family, our relationships, our work, our school. All of these can have developmental consequences and financial ones at that as well. And on financial consequences, there can be issues with spending money on new games and DLCs we can't afford, but there are also loot boxes, skins, spending money on in-game microtransactions that can sort of mirror gambling addiction. If we're spending a lot of time gaming, our social exposure may be filtered through the games we play, which can make social interaction outside of the game even harder and not give space to develop social skills besides in gaming. And this can lead to a deep sense of loneliness and only push us deeper into gaming and increase our fears of socializing. Another symptom of addiction in gaming is craving. So craving when we aren't gaming is, I was going to say thinking deeply about it, and it does mean thinking deeply about it, but it's sort of somatic as well. It's more than just thinking. It's sort of obsessing, craving a substance with our whole being, kind of identifying with it almost. And this craving, it can really rob us of our presence and cause us to get quite frustrated with people close to us that block us from gaming. It can lead us to lying or manipulating. Addicts aren't bad people, but to use a substance which you become dependent on to game, if you're dependent on it, you can kind of end up manipulating people to game more. We may, for example, pull a sickie if we've just downloaded a new game. Another symptom can be emotional regulation. Emotional regulation being risked being done just by the game. And this can mean we lose tolerance to strong feelings, discomfort, or even boredom, that those perfectly normal things, feelings, boredom, being uncomfortable, become intolerable. And we reach either for a game itself or for content, article, videos on gaming, just to relieve being bored. We need to be stimulated. And if we're neglecting those feelings, boredom, discomfort, and we're feeling intensity of feelings from a game that are really quite intense, that can lead to probably the most frightening symptom of addiction, anhedonia. That means an inability to find joy in anything else besides gaming, because nothing else quite fills that hole, and the rest of life turns depressing, kind of dull. It does mirror depression. And the saddest thing of all is that eventually, with tolerance, even the game doesn't make us happy. It just makes us feel normal, and nothing else sure makes us happy either. Gaming addiction can affect our mind, can affect our attention span, our episodic and our working memory, problem solving, writing, speaking, and our academic performance. And it's also been linked to mental health conditions such as dissociation, concentration difficulties, mood disorders like depression or anxiety, social phobias, loneliness, paranoia, and existential issues on purpose in life, feeling drawn to gaming, but also an angst that we are not doing things outside of the game, and that can very much play on us. I'm going to have another glass of tea. Causes. So we've got an idea of what gaming addiction is and some symptoms of this behavioural addiction. Now let's talk a bit more about the aetology, what might cause someone to veer into addiction, and what might be protective against it. This section may appear quite lengthy, but if you're experiencing problematic gaming, it can be of therapeutic value to recognise the things that contribute to this, and it can give us more control to shift some of those things that contribute, rather than just focusing on the individual factors and blaming ourselves. It may be partly our choices, but there are lots of other things which contribute towards gaming addiction that you can work on. A lot of the research for this section was done using two meta-analyses that both came out in 2023. One is the same one I mentioned earlier by Limon et al., and the other by Kirali et al. And as I said earlier, you'll find full references at the end of this video. It's also worth noting that not all of these things are simple causal relationships, and a lot of them create feedback loops. Like if you scratch a spot, it causes you to itch, so you scratch more. To give an example, health conditions like depression are more likely to cause people to compulsively game, but people gaming compulsively are also likely to be depressed. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario going on with all of these things I'm going to mention. Anyway, the causes can be roughly broken down into three categories: environmental, individual, and gaming factors. And first up, let's talk about those gaming factors, the way the game itself pulls us in and can contribute towards compulsive play. Games are engaging. They go a step further than the scenes and sounds of your television by using your hands and putting you in control of a character. There's something almost like a stimming toy in using the controller. They utilise the senses in that sense, and the mind is constantly thinking, planning, and responding during play. Furthermore, games offer a plethora of options and genres to immerse yourself in. Anyone that says they don't like games, it's a little bit like saying, I don't like films. There's so many types, it's difficult to discredit it. In the UK, in 2024, the gaming industry was estimated to be worth £7.6 billion. That is an unfathomable number. And so there are lots of money and research being put into making games enjoyable experiences worthy of sinking our free time into. There are also some more sinister tactics of ensuring that you spend time on a game. And one of those uses Pavlovian conditioning through intermittent reinforcement, which is a fancy way of saying the rewards you get in gaming are unpredictable and a little bit random. At the moment, I'm playing Elden Ring, and I am grinding for a staff that is from one enemy in a particular place in Volcano Manor. It's very hard. The drop rate isn't very high. I know it's possible to get this stuff, and I know just one more attempt it might happen. There's an intermittent reinforcement of knowing it's possible and grinding to try and get it. And this same mechanism can keep people playing one more match, one more try. It's like gambling for a win. There's one particularly sinister technique of loot boxes. So players buy these loot boxes with real world money in the hope of getting rare drops, skins, unlocks, and they can find themselves with a gambling addiction, investing real money to get this rare unlock. There's a principle called the sunk cost effect that can entrench people into spending more on loot boxes if they've already spent money to begin with. Because stopping spending makes the money they've already spent meaningless. It's a sort of, I've spent 50 quid, I might as well spend another 10 mentality. And the players who end up spending the most on loot boxes also tend to be quite vulnerable. You might think that people that spend a lot of money on games are wealthy people that don't have very much time to spare, so they're trying to invest money to enjoy their gaming experience. But that's not the case. The people that spend a lot of money on games, they're a bit more vulnerable. There's an exploitation. There's actually even a term in the industry, whales. So there's this exploitative whale hunting where games aim to find people who aren't able to control the amount of money they spend on microtransactions and to kind of hook in these whales. So that's the games, and there are some other factors around gaming. Playing online was associated with increasing the risk of gaming addiction. And online playing can be with online games, but it can also include gaming whilst having chats opened or using social media to talk at the same time as you're gaming, being on Discord, that kind of thing. But playing online is especially true for gamers that play games that have online play built into them in a real world that continues to move while you're not playing it. Think the massive multiplayer online RPGs, your World of Warcrafts, your RuneScapes, your Eden, is it? Where you may be in a clan. Eve, that's what I mean. So you're in a clan, you're in a guild. If you're not playing, you're letting the guild down, you're letting the side down. You need to keep investing in this game or you're missing out. And that can draw people into risking addiction. So what I'm saying is games that create a sense of community or where there are social pressures to play increase the risk of compulsive play. And this is magnified even further if a player has a romantic relationship or their friendship base revolve around gaming or a game. Effectively, games do give you a sense of social connection, but that can go to an extreme and lead to compulsive play if you're not meeting your social needs outside of a game. As well as social games, competitive ones are also more likely to risk addiction. So genres such as MOBAs, real-time strategies, shooters, sports game. If a game gives you a sense of reward, mastery, achievement over others, or excellence, if there's a leaderboard, there can be a drive to keep playing to retain that achievement, that title, and not to lose it. Especially if you're not meeting those senses of mastery outside of a game. There was a little bit of mention about violent games being more addictive than other genres, but yeah, I don't know if there's been that much research into it. I also want to put a quick disclaimer of that there's a big myth that's circulated that violent games cause people to be violent, and that's a myth that's been researched to heck, and there aren't associations. The final gaming factor is that many games allow you to create an avatar and to customize their playstyle, their appearance, their way of playing the game, their personality. It can lead to us meeting our needs through that avatar, and that's a process called identification. So we project onto the avatar and work their social needs and rewards rather than our own. And this was associated with compulsive gaming, when we form an attachment with our character in a game. Secondly, individual factors. Individual factors, causes, are the health, demographic, personality traits of the individual that are more or less likely to predispose them to gaming addiction. There are 2.5 males experiencing gaming disorder compared to every 1 female, despite the fact that 45% of gamers are female. So if you're a guy, you're a lot more likely to become addicted to a game than if you're a girl. Younger brains are less developed in areas related to impulse control and novelty seeking. So if you are a child or an adolescent, if you're under 25, you are also more likely to be at risk of gaming disorder than older adults. There was some mention of ethnicity and culture, but it's not been researched enough to actually hold up. For example, there was some talk about pressures to do well in school or job competitions in Asian culture. And so because there's so much pressure to do well in school, maybe if you're not doing well in school, you gravitate towards a game where you can do well. But like I say, it is not hard enough evidence. It's not statistically significant. I would be very interested if there was a study on stigma, which seems to fuel other addictions, and how perspectives culturally on gaming impact on susceptibility to gaming disorder. My hypothesis is that stigma creates shame, and then people who get stuck in compulsive play aren't able to reach out for support or for their community, which leads them to become ostracized and more likely to game. But that wasn't in the studies. There was an interesting study by Ahmed et al. In 2022, which was talking a lot about the amount of time per day somebody games. So those with addictive gaming spent on average 5.25 plus or minus 1.9 hours a day gaming, compared to 3.8 plus or minus 2.5 hours spent by non-addicted gamers. It's less about the time and more about your relationship and the reason for your gaming. But if you're gaming for 2 hours a day or less, that seems fairly normal and low risk within the literature. Whereas if you're approaching 5 hours of gaming a day, you're at quite high risk of gaming disorder. There were some emotional risks, such as people with alexithymia, where recognizing and expressing emotions are harder. And if you're using gaming to regulate emotions and struggles and struggle to manage them without, there was quite an association of people whose motive for gaming was more for escapism from intense things than for entertainment. Impulsivity was linked to the risk of problematic gaming, as well as mental health issues like depression, GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, and low self-esteem. There are also certain neurotypes, like all three different types of ADHD, maybe because of the impulsivity thing. And there are some weaker links with autism, maybe because it's a easy thing to become a special interest, I'm not sure. With mental health conditions, so I talked about things like depression or anxiety, gaming was seen as a respite from them. So you could go to those things to escape for mental health stuff, but ironically, it's not a stable respite, and if anything, it makes them worse. There was also more substance misuse and suicidal ideation in gaming disorder, but again, it's unclear which one causes which. As mentioned in the gaming factors, people who are socially anxious or have less skills in social interaction are more at risk of compulsive play to meet those social factors, as are people who are lonely or don't have good support systems or supportive close relationships. Finally, there was a really interesting link between insomnia and gaming disorder that statistically was quite powerful. So people with compulsive play tended to sleep for 2 whole hours less a night. They might lose track of time and end up gaming way into the night, or they may wake up in the middle of the night and then start gaming again. Like Little Gaming Gremlins, the Christmas old film, like Little Gremlins. There's a risk of gaming disorder that increases quite a lot if you're gaming after midnight. So if you're a gamer and it is 12:01, your risk goes right on up. Gonna have another bit of tea. The final causal thing is environmental factors. So by environment, I mean family, history, situation. On family and upbringing, a positive, functioning family is unsurprisingly protective against gaming disorder. Picture a family, this the ideal family, where they communicate well with a child. There's communal family activities that they all do together, where there's warmth, connection, and the child grows up with a secure sense of attachment. In this family, the parents may monitor more and limit access to devices. This was seen as protective. And the assumption behind this was that the child learns to self-soothe and regulate their emotions without using a game, so is less likely to then game for escapism or because of emotional overwhelm. Considering also that insomnia was so closely linked to compulsive play, one factor to consider if you are struggling with gaming addiction is whether or not you have a console in your bedroom. And if you do, whether it's accessible to turn it on in the middle of the night. So opposite of a positive family upbringing, a more difficult family upbringing related to increased risk of gaming addiction. Imagine, instead of our ideal family, imagine a family where there was conflict, where there's neglect, a authoritarian climate, or quite violent discipline. And this is magnified so much with adverse childhood experiences, with ACEs like abuse, neglect, safeguarding concerns. All of these traumatic things are quite highly correlated with addiction, as well as mental health concerns and shame. The meta-analysis also found an uncomfortable link between single-parent households, irrespective of parental devotion or how good the single parent is, which the paper hypothesized to be around how available a parent is for their child, how much the child self-soothes with devices, I guess. Outside of family, there was a link between success or satisfaction in work and school, and that driving compulsive, more competitive play for reasons of mastery. Effectively, people with gaming addictions tended to do worse in school, which may either be that they are gaming to feel reward or success, or that a person is distracted from schooling because they're gaming. Again, cause and effect is hard to tell with these causes. Similarly to how well a child is doing, how integrated a child is in school, how well their friendships are going, that also impacts on compulsive play. A child who is either bullying or being bullied has a much higher risk of gaming addiction. Same if they are more socially isolated. That risk increases even more if a person's core friendship group are facilitated through the game, or if the people that they associate with are other problematic gamers. Generally, in addiction, you tend to associate with people who use a substance to a similar level to you, until you reach a point where it's normal for you to be gaming for 6 hours a night. At first, when you start gaming at a higher rate, you'll be unlikely to find other people who game at the same level for you, but you find people overseas, etc., and it normalizes it. The final environmental factor was on pressure to make a career out of gaming. This is a new one. But if you are gaming to try and make a career, for example, you want to be a content creator on YouTube, like me, gaming in the background, but you're trying to become a gaming channel. If you want to be a games designer, or you're trying to be really competitive to become an esports personality, that can be causal for gaming addiction. So that was the section on the causes of gaming addiction. And if any of those causes resonate with you, or your history, the games you play, or you as an individual, think if you could tweak or change any of them. And you may find that if you work on those causes, that you don't need to game as much. The next section is on treatment for addiction. Recovery from addiction is notoriously difficult, and some philosophies like 12 steps will even hold that recovery is a process and that being recovered isn't possible, that you'll always have the potential to relapse into compulsive gaming if you're an addict. For someone stuck in dangerous cycles of compulsive play, here are some ways that recovery can look. It may look like harm reduction. So reducing the risk of your gaming and building in space for those other things that we might easily neglect. It may, for example, practically look like something like building in a reward system to earn gaming time rather than just assuming we're going to have that 6 hours in the evening. A treatment could look like building awareness of our gaming. Maybe start a gaming diary. So talk about the games you played, how long you were playing, when you played them, what the experience was like. All of those things around diarying can help to boost awareness, and if you're aware of something, you have more control on it. Working on shame and self-esteem that can come from addiction that only ends up fueling it can help to work on addiction, just working on those things. Look at life holistically and look at your boundaries with loved ones to manage playtime's expectations rather than just focusing on the gaming addiction. See it as part of you as the whole person. Recognize triggers to lower our risk of relapsing into compulsive patterns of play. What is it that would mean that I am more likely to game? Recovery can look like mindfully building tolerance to the discomfort of emotions or boredom, to working to reduce the link to cravings, or being tolerant to sit with those cravings and to not game on them. Naming it. I'm craving a game right now. I'm thinking about the game right now. What's happening underneath? What's pushing me to want to change my state? It may look like deeper therapeutic work to look at some of the causes, such as trauma, comorbidities, adverse childhood experiences, the things that predispose people towards addictive behavior. And it could look like building an affirming community of people who support you, and in finding a safe, sustainable relationship with people outside the game. You may, for example, be interested in Gaming Anonymous. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous, but yeah, Gaming Anonymous have various different online meetings, not many face-to-face ones, but it's a community. My own approach as a counsellor is about radical acceptance of you as a human being trying your best with what you have. You're not bad, you're not to blame, you're trying your best. And gaming has been you trying your best. It's about deep empathy of you, of the subconscious needs that you are meeting to understand what gaming's doing for you. That it makes sense to look at where you're not meeting those needs elsewhere. Gaming and using your special interests me, and I'd be interested in even talking about your game as a means of therapeutic exploration. That was it. Gonna have another glass of tea. So thank you as ever for listening, and do feel free to check out the other videos on my channel for an exploration of gaming as a therapeutic tool for mental health. I am on Facebook at Simon's Listening Counselling Services. I'm on TikTok at Simon's Listening, and you can check out my website at www.simonslistening.co.uk. If you're considering starting counselling for gaming addiction or other reasons, do feel free to get in touch. I'd be very happy to offer you a free half-hour intro call to give you a sense if I feel like the right fit for you, and I would love to journey with you. And finally, feel free to comment your own thoughts on compulsive gaming and tips for coping with it, or any recommendations of other topics that would be useful to explore. I am a fairly small channel, so I do tend to read and respond to most comments, but do as ever bear in mind that any comments are out in the public domain, so respect your own confidentiality in posting them. Thank you again for listening, and in closing I will just put up some of the references that I've used. Do check them out, they're all very excellent articles. Thank you.